My daughter looked at me and said I was too old. It was a Tuesday afternoon in May, humid and thick even inside the dining room of her little row house in Federal Hill, Baltimore. We were surrounded by fabric swatches and floral printouts, the air conditioner pushing faintly against the heat pressing outside. Her fiancé, Mark, sat silently at the head of the table, flipping through a magazine, occasionally nodding when Claire spoke. My son, Alex, her brother, wasn't there. He lived across the country. It felt very small, this planning session. And suddenly, so did I. Claire's words were not loud, not shouted, just stated, flat and definitive, as if she were reading an item off a checklist. Mother, appearance, unsuitable. The phrase lingered in the air, heavier than the May humidity. I felt the sudden dizzying sensation of the floor tilting beneath me, the cheerful brightness of the room curdling into something sharp and cold. She didn't look away when she said it, her gaze steady on the photographer's portfolio open on the table. Mom, she'd started, her tone softening just slightly, a practiced gentle hand before the blade. We talked about the photos. The style we're going for, it's very specific, more modern. She paused, glancing at Mark, who offered a small, approving nod. Then directly to me, and honestly, for the main family shots, the ones that go in the album, you look too old. If you've lived through something like this, let me know where you're watching from. I'm genuinely curious who else this resonates with. The words themselves were simple, brutal in their directness. Too old, not too tired, or perhaps not dressed correctly, or needing makeup adjusted. Just too old, as if age itself were a disqualifier, a visual imperfection to be cropped out or hidden in the back row. The photographer's sample album lay open to a spread of a young, vibrant family, parents looking barely older than the children. All smooth skin and effortless smile. I looked down at my hands resting on the dark wood of the table. They were hands that had held her when she was sick, packed countless lunches, signed permission slips, held her hair back when she was teenager sick, hands with veins that showed now, skin that was not smooth. They looked like hands that had lived a life, raised children, hands that apparently didn't belong in a modern photo album. Mark finally spoke, his voice soft, placating. It's just Claire has a vision, Dorothy, for the aesthetic. Aesthetic. The word hung there, a shield for the cruelty. My name, Dorothy, felt alien, formal, separated from the casual dismissal. I wanted to ask, what aesthetic? The one where mothers disappear. But the words wouldn't come. My throat felt tight, a knot forming rapidly, strangling any response. Claire continued, oblivious, or perhaps deliberately ignoring my silence. We'll get some candids, of course. And maybe one with you during the reception? But for the formal shots, we're really focusing on the wedding party and immediate families who fit the look. Fit the look. The look apparently did not include me. I thought of the thousands I had saved over the years tucked away specifically for this day, her wedding, not just for a dress or a plane ticket, but to contribute, to help make it happen, to be a part of it. Now, my presence, my actual physical self, was deemed a liability, a visual blight on their perfect, curated day. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral, a mask of calm descending. Inside, something fractured. It wasn't just about a photograph. It was about being seen, about value, about the abrupt, sharp realization that after a lifetime of giving, my physical existence was now an inconvenience. The samples on the table blurred, my vision swimming. I focused on a water stain on the dark wood, a small, irregular shape that felt more real than the conversation unfolding around me. I managed a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. I see, I said, the words thin, brittle. Claire beamed, relieved the difficult part was over. Great, Mom. I knew you'd understand. Understand what? That my appearance was a problem? That my place was not central but peripheral, a fading background element? The feeling was intensely isolating, like standing in a crowded room, but feeling utterly alone. Mark went back to his magazine. Claire picked up a swatch of silk. The conversation moved on to bridesmaids' dresses, the lightness returning to her voice as if she hadn't just delivered a blow that echoed through decades of my life. They talked about color palettes and fabric weights, details that felt utterly trivial compared to the weight settling in my chest. I listened, nodding occasionally, my mind replaying her words. Too old. It wasn't a critique of my outfit or my hair that day. It was an indictment of time itself, etched onto my face, carried in my posture, a fundamental state of being that was undesirable. I thought about my own wedding photos, my mother standing proudly beside me, her face lined from worry and laughter, but her presence unquestioned vital. There was no talk of aesthetics then, only family gathered. The air in the room grew thick again, but this time not from the heat, but from the unspoken things gathering between us. I looked at my daughter, the young woman I had raised, and saw a stranger, someone whose priorities felt alien and sharp. The silk swatch in her hand seemed impossibly smooth, flawless. Unlike me, I needed to leave. The impulse was sudden, strong. To get in my car, drive back to my quiet house in the suburbs of Olney, Maryland, and sit in the silence, processing the precise nature of the wound. But I was trapped, expected to stay, to participate in this planning that was steadily erasing me. The water stain on the table seemed to spread, a dark, growing shape. The weeks that followed were a blur of forced cheerfulness and careful avoidance. Claire would call, full of wedding details, but the conversations felt surface level. She talked about seating charts and cake flavors, things that felt safe. We never revisited the photo conversation directly, but its ghost was always present, a silent barrier between us. I found myself looking in mirrors differently, searching for the too old she had seen. My reflection seemed the same, tired sometimes, yes, but objectionable. It was the filter through which she saw me that had changed, become clinical, judgmental. I started avoiding family video calls, finding excuses. The thought of seeing her, of seeing that subtle judgment in her eyes was too much. My friends asked about the wedding, excited, wanting details. I kept it vague, talking about the dress, the venue. I couldn't bring myself to tell them about the photos. How do you say your own daughter doesn't want you in her wedding pictures because you're too old? It felt shameful, a failure on my part somehow, as if I had aged incorrectly. I busied myself with small tasks around the house, organizing closets, tending the garden, anything to occupy my hands and keep my mind from circling back to that dining room table. Those were the silence in my house felt different now, not peaceful, but empty, echoing with her voice. I walked past framed family photos on the mantelpiece. Claire's graduation, Alex's college move-in day, holidays, in all of them, I was present, a central figure, smiling, part of the fabric. The thought that this upcoming, most significant day would have images where I was deliberately excluded felt like a historical revision, an undoing of my own past. The future wedding album became a symbol of my displacement, a tangible record of being left out. I knew I couldn't let it stand, not just for me, but for whatever dignity I had left. The idea came slowly, a quiet insistence that began as a small seed of resentment and grew into a firm resolve. If my presence in their photos was undesirable, then I would create my own record, a record that included me, on my terms. The money I had saved, the wedding fund, it was mine. I could use it however I saw fit. The irony was sharp. The very resources I had intended to contribute to their aesthetic vision could be redirected to counter it. I started researching photographers, not the sleek, modern kind Claire had chosen, but others. I looked for candid styles, photojournalistic approaches, photographers who captured moments, emotion, the reality of a day, not just the curated facade. I spent hours online, poring over websites, reading bios. I was looking for someone who saw people, not just subjects for a composition. I found a photographer based in the same area, just outside of Baltimore, in Towson. Her name was Clara Bell. Her website featured photos that were warm, genuine, full of life. Shots of grandparents dancing, quiet moments between family members, not just posed portraits. She talked about capturing the story of the day. That resonated. My story was still unfolding, even if they wanted to edit me out of a chapter. I read reviews. Clients praised her ability to be unobtrusive, to capture real emotion. This was what I needed. Someone who could be present without being performative, who could see the moments Claire and Mark might overlook or deem insignificant. I bookmarked her site, returning to it several times over the next few days. The act of searching felt subversive, a small rebellion blooming in the quiet of my home. It was the first time since that Tuesday afternoon that I felt a sense of agency, a stirring of something other than hurt. I sent Clara an email. I kept it brief, professional. I explained I was the mother of the bride and was interested in her services for the upcoming wedding. I did not mention the reason initially. I simply inquired about her availability and rates for a second photographer, someone who could focus on different aspects of the day. This felt like a lie of omission, but I wasn't ready to lay bare the raw wound. Her response was prompt and friendly. She was available and sent over her package options. Her rates were high, higher than I expected, but well within the budget I had set aside. This money felt different now. It wasn't a gift being offered, but a tool being wielded. It was my resource, my means to ensure my own visibility. Reading her email, seeing the concrete possibility of this plan, a sense of quiet determination settled over me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about existence, about refusing to be erased. I scheduled a phone call with her a few days later. Talking to her was easy. She had a calm, knowing voice. When she asked about my specific needs for a second photographer, I hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell her the truth, or at least a version of it. My daughter has a very specific vision for the formal photos, I explained, choosing my words carefully. And, well, I'm concerned that certain family members, including myself, might not be. And featured prominently in those. I paused, letting the implication hang. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she said gently, "Ah, I understand. Sometimes the vision can overlook the heart of the day. Heart of the day. The phrase struck me. That was exactly it. They were focused on the surface, the look, the aesthetic, and in doing so, they were missing the deeper connections, the history, the heart. I felt a swell of relief. She understood. I explained that I wanted someone to capture the candid moments, the emotions, the interactions that weren't staged. I wanted photos that told the full story, including the parts they might not prioritize. I told her I would be covering the cost myself, as a gift. This wasn't entirely true. It felt more like an investment in my own sanity. But phrasing it as a gift made it simpler, less confrontational. Clara listened patiently. She outlined how she could work either independently or coordinating minimally with the main photographer if needed, ensuring she didn't interfere but captured the moments I was looking for. We talked for nearly an hour. By the end of the call, the plan felt solid, real. I felt a quiet strength I hadn't felt in months. We agreed on a package, and I sent her the deposit the next day. The transaction felt significant, a silent assertion of my place. I did not tell Claire. Not yet. The wedding was still several months away. I wanted this to be my knowledge, my quiet preparation. It was a secret that felt empowering. In the midst of their meticulous planning and careful curation, I was creating my own parallel narrative, a hidden layer of reality that would exist alongside theirs. I imagined the wedding day, the main photographer directing poses, capturing the aesthetic, while Clara moved quietly through the background, documenting the fleeting glances, the shared smiles, the hand squeezes, the true moments of connection. And importantly, she would be there to capture me, not posed and perfected, but real, present. The house still felt quiet, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the hum of my own purpose. This wasn't just about photographs. It was about reclaiming my space, my visibility in my own daughter's life. It felt like a long, slow breath after being held underwater. The wedding planning continued, a steady drumbeat of emails, calls, and occasional visits that felt increasingly strained. Claire was immersed in details, her focus narrowed to the perfect shade of blush linen and the precise height of the centerpieces. My role felt reduced to that of a bank account and an occasional sounding board for vendor complaints. She rarely asked for my opinion on anything that truly mattered, only on logistical issues that required payment or effort. The emotional distance that had opened up after the too-old comment seemed to widen with every passing week. I continued my silent preparation with Clara. We spoke a few more times on the phone, finalizing details, discussing the timeline of the day. I gave her a list of key family members and moments I wanted her to prioritize capturing, subtly emphasizing my own inclusion in shots with my son, with my sister who was flying in, with old family friends. I sent her photos of myself, my son, and my sister, not for identification purposes, but because I wanted her to see us, to recognize the faces she would be seeking out. It felt like a quiet act of ensuring my reality was documented. Regardless of the official narrative, I also started focusing on myself. It felt strange, almost selfish after years of prioritizing everyone else. I got my hair cut, a style that felt more like me now, not just convenient. I found a dress for the wedding, not one chosen to fit anyone's aesthetic, but my own sense of quiet elegance. It was a deep emerald green, a color I loved but rarely wore. Putting it on felt like putting on armor. There were small moments of tension during the final weeks. A conversation about the seating chart where I was placed at a table away from the head table with distant relatives. Claire explained it was for flow, that the wedding party and immediate family needed to be closer for speeches. But the head table was largely empty of family, filled instead with friends and colleagues. My sister, Margaret, noticed. That seems odd, Dorothy, she said gently during a call. For the mother of the bride not to be at the main table. I brushed it off, saying it was fine. Claire's vision. But it stung. Another small act of being marginalized, pushed to the periphery. It reinforced the need for Clara, for my own visual record. I kept thinking of the wedding album, the physical object sitting on a coffee table, a story told in pictures. Whose story would it be? Would I be a ghost in the narrative? A face occasionally glimpsed in the background? This fueled my resolve. The quiet anger that had been simmering since May solidified into a cold, hard core. It wasn't about vanity. It was about denying their attempt to erase me. To say, I was here. I mattered. I am part of this family's history. Whether your curated photos show it or not, the days counted down. The house in Olney felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could be myself, unjudged. I looked at my hands, no longer just seeing the veins, but seeing the strength in them, the capacity to act, to shape my own reality. The emerald dress hung in the closet, a promise. The wedding day arrived, bright and clear in the suburbs of Rockville, not far from where I lived. The air hummed with activity, a controlled chaos orchestrated by planners and vendors. I moved through the early hours in a state of quiet observation. I saw Claire, radiant and beautiful, surrounded by bridesmaids. I saw Mark, nervous and beaming. I saw the principal photographer, a young man with precise movements, already directing light and angles. I exchanged pleasantries, smiled when expected. But inside, I felt a detachment, like an anthropologist stologing a ritual from a slight remove. Clara arrived quietly, dressed in dark, unobtrusive clothing, a camera slung over her shoulder. We made eye contact across a crowded room, a brief, acknowledging glance that felt like a secret handshake. She offered a small, genuine smile, and in that moment, I felt seen, truly seen, not as a prop or a problem, but as a person. It was a powerful feeling. I watched her begin her work, moving through the periphery, capturing stolen moments, a whispered joke between groomsmen, a mother adjusting a boutonniere, the nervous energy in the air. She wasn't intrusive, wasn't demanding attention. She was simply there, observing, documenting. The main photographer was all about staging, about creating perfect tableaus. Chin up, shoulders back, he'd instruct. Everyone smile, big smiles. It felt artificial, manufactured. Clara worked differently. I saw her capture a quiet look exchanged between my sister and me, a look that spoke volumes about shared history and unspoken support. It was a fleeting moment, invisible to the main photographer, but captured by her lens. This was what I had paid for. Reality. Connection. My reality. During the formal photo session after the ceremony, the main photographer gathered the key groups. The wedding part first, a long glamorous line. Then Mark's family, parents, siblings. Then the call for bride's immediate family. Claire gestured, just Dad and Alex for now, please. My husband, long deceased, was represented by Alex. I stood to the side as instructed earlier. My sister came and stood near me, a silent show of solidarity. I watched as the main photographer posed them, arranging heights, tilting heads. They looked picture perfect, the ideal modern family unit, except for the missing element. A strange calm settled over me. There was the hurt, still present, a dull ache, but there was also a sense of quiet power. I knew that across the lawn, or maybe just outside the frame, Clara was working. She wasn't part of this posed tableau, this careful exclusion. She was capturing the entire scene. The forced smiles of the posed group, yes, but also the expressions on the faces of those standing slightly apart. She caught my eye again from a distance. This time, her look wasn't just acknowledging, it was reassuring. It said, I see you, and I am recording that you are here. I didn't feel the need to push forward, to demand my place in that specific frame. Their curated album would tell one story. Mine, captured by Clara, would tell another. And I knew which one would hold more truth, more heart. The sun was warm on my skin. The air smelled of cut grass and flowers. Life was happening, messy and beautiful, beyond the edges of their perfect picture. And someone was capturing that life, my life, within this significant day. As the reception began, the atmosphere loosened. Music played, guests mingled. The main photographer focused on the dances, the cake cutting, the major events. Clara, however, seemed to everywhere at once, yet nowhere noticeably. She was capturing the laughter at the tables, the quiet conversations, the way the light hit the faces of people talking. I saw her take a photo of me sitting with my sister, both of us smiling at something someone said. A genuine moment. I saw her capture me, looking at Claire during the father-daughter dance. My son stood in for his father. A complex expression likely on my face. Love, perhaps a hint of sadness for the distance between us. A quiet pride in the woman she had become, despite everything. I didn't have to perform for her lens. I just had to be present. There was a small, subtle power in this. I wasn't seeking their approval or their inclusion anymore. I had secured my own. Towards the end of the evening, Claire approached me, flushed with happiness and perhaps a little champagne. Mom, are you having a good time? She asked, her voice sweeter than it had been in months. Yes, dear, I replied. Truthfully, I was. Not in the way I had expected, perhaps. Not in the role I had always envisioned, but in a way that felt deeply personal and affirming. I had navigated the day on my own terms. Good, she said, then glanced around. Did you see the photographer? The main one? Did he get any pictures of you? The question felt perfunctory, an afterthought. I'm not sure, I said, keeping my expression mild. I haven't really been paying attention, which was true in a way. I hadn't been paying attention to him. She nodded, satisfied with the not answer. Okay, well, we'll see the proof soon. She hugged me quickly, a fleeting embrace, before being pulled away by friends. As she walked away, I saw Clara across the room, her camera raised, capturing something, perhaps the interaction I just had with Claire, perhaps something entirely different. It didn't matter. I trusted her. The quiet hum of the reception filled the air. I felt a sense of peace settling over me, a peace I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't dependent on Claire's validation or inclusion. It came from within, from the knowledge that I had taken steps to honor my own experience of the day. My sister came over, raising an eyebrow. Everything all right? She asked. Yes, Margaret, I said. And for the first time that day, my smile felt entirely real. Everything is exactly as it needs to be. We watched Claire laughing with her new husband. The main photographer was there, flashbulbs popping, capturing the official narrative. Our narrative, the quieter, more complex one, was also being preserved, frame by frame, by a photographer no one else in the room knew I had hired. A few weeks after the wedding, the proofs from the main photographer arrived. Claire excitedly shared the online gallery link. I scrolled through them. They were beautiful, technically perfect. The posed shots were stunning, the lighting flawless, everyone positioned just right. The aesthetic was indeed achieved. And just as Claire had indicated, I was barely present. A few shots from a distance during the ceremony, one or two blurry candids from the reception where I was on the edge of a group. No formal family portrait that included me. My husband's place was marked, yes, but my own was conspicuously absent from the key moments. It hurt, seeing the visual confirmation of my exclusion, but the sting was less sharp than it would have been. I had expected it. This wasn't the whole story. A few days later, an email arrived from Clara. She had finished processing my photos. Her email was simple. Dorothy, here is your gallery from the wedding. It was a privilege to capture these moments for you. I hope they show you what I saw. I clicked the link, my hands trembling slightly. The first image loaded. It was a photo of my hand resting on my sister's arm during the ceremony, a simple gesture of comfort and connection. The light was soft, the detail sharp, capturing the lines on my skin, the subtle shape of my nails. It wasn't a posed perfect hand. It was my hand. The hand Claire had implicitly deemed too old for her photos. And in this image, it was central, beautiful in its reality. I scrolled through the gallery. There were dozens, hundreds of photographs, moments I hadn't even realized were being captured. My reflection in a window pane as I got ready, a thoughtful, slightly nervous expression on my face, me talking animatedly with my son before the ceremony, both of us genuinely laughing, my sister helping me adjust my dress, a moment of quiet intimacy. Photos of me watching Claire walk down the aisle, the emotions clear on my face, pride, love, a touch of sorrow. Photos of me interacting with guests, with old friends I hadn't seen in years. Photos of me on the dance floor later in the evening, not dancing wildly, but swaying gently with my sister, comfortable and content. And yes, photos of me sitting at the table, observing, a quiet smile playing on my lips. There was a particularly poignant series, shots of me watching the formal photo session from the side, capturing my expression as I saw myself excluded from the main group. Clara had captured not just my presence, but my emotional experience of the day. There were also beautiful candid shots of Claire and Mark, tender moments that felt more real than the staged perfection. And there were photos of my son, Alex, looking at me with clear affection in his eyes, moments that made my throat tight. These weren't just pictures. They were validation. They were proof that I was there, that I was a vital part of the day, that I was seen, and that my life, my age, my presence was not something to be hidden or erased. I sat with the photos for a long time, tears finally falling, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of relief and gratitude. Clara had given me back my story. She had counteracted the carefully constructed narrative of absence with an overwhelming presence. I felt a quiet triumph. They wanted to edit me out, but I had hired someone to write me back in vivid detail. The cost, which had seemed significant, now felt like the best money I had ever spent. It was an instant in my dignity, in my history, in my right to exist visibly within my own family story. I saved the gallery link, knowing I would return to it often. This was my wedding album. It wasn't bound in leather or placed on a coffee table for public display, but it was mine, a personal collection of moments that told the truth of the day. From my perspective, I didn't share the link with Claire. It wasn't for her judgment or approval. It was for me. It was for my sister who had stood by me. It was for my son, who saw me. It was a quiet, internal victory. I thought about the dining room table, the fabric swatches, the cruel, careless words. Too old. The phrase still held a faint echo, but it no longer held power over me. It was just a measure of someone else's limited vision, their narrow definition of beauty and worth. The act of paying for the photographer had been more than a transaction. It was a declaration of my value, my resilience, my refusal to disappear. I had used my resources, hard-earned and saved over a lifetime, not to buy acceptance or inclusion, but to document my undeniable reality. It was a quiet rebellion, executed with grace and funded by years of maternal sacrifice. Looking at Clara's photos, I saw my face, lined, yes, but full of emotion, of history, of life. I saw my hands, capable and strong, captured in moments of connection. I saw me, not through the eyes of someone who found me wanting, but through the lens of someone who saw my inherent worth. The power wasn't in making Claire regret her words or forcing her to include me in her album. The power was in creating my own proof of presence, a parallel record that validated my experience. I didn't need their aesthetic validation. I had my own visual truth. The quiet house in Olney felt empty again. Not empty, not echoing with past hurts, but solid, grounded. It was a space where I could define myself, where my story was not subject to anyone else's editing pen. Months later, a large framed photo arrived from Claire and Mark, a print from the main photographer. It was one of the posed family shots, featuring Mark's family, Claire's father, and Alex. I was predictably not in it. I placed it on a side table. It was a nice picture, technically proficient, but it felt like a postcard from a different event, a party I had only partially attended, a story where I was a footnote. My real photos, Clara's photos, were saved securely, a private gallery filled with genuine moments, with laughter and quiet tears, and shared glances. I sometimes looked through them alone, reliving the day, seeing myself in the midst of it all, fully thence. The emerald dress hung in my closet, no longer armor, but simply a dress I had worn on a significant day, a day I had navigated on my own terms. Claire and I found a new equilibrium, a carefully maintained politeness. We talked, we visited, but something fundamental had shifted. The easy warmth was gone, replaced by a cool distance. It was sad, yes, a grief for the relationship I thought we had, but it was also freeing. I no longer sought her approval in the same way. I no longer felt the need to perform a role she might accept. I was simply myself. One afternoon, my son Alex visited. He saw the framed wedding photo from Claire. He picked it up, looked at it, and then looked at me. Mom, he said, his voice gentle, you weren't in many of these, were you? It wasn't an accusation, just an observation tinged with understanding. I shrugged slightly. No, I said, not the posed ones. He put the photo down and came over to sit beside me on the sofa. That's not right, he said simply. His acknowledgement, quiet and unsolicited, meant more than any grand gesture. He saw it. He saw me. I didn't need to explain the photos I had, the gallery I kept private. He knew. He had been there, had seen the subtle ways I was sidelined. His validation was enough. He talked about his life, his work. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. It was a simple, ordinary moment, but it felt profoundly meaningful. This was family, this was connection. It wasn't about staged perfection or curated images. It was about presence, about being seen and accepted for who you are. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. The quiet of the house felt like a warm embrace. I had paid for a photographer to capture moments, but in doing so, I had purchased something far more valuable, my own emotional freedom, a quiet reclaiming of my place in the world, visible and strong,